Joining me now is my friend and colleague, and I think the person I rely on the most at the company to help me when I am off on other projects, Tamara Ugolini. And from day one, you were a pandemic skeptic. In fact, that's why we hired you. And then once you started seeing what was happening with some of the lockdown adjacent issues like vaccine mandates, you really flew into action. I think, despite what Andre Picard might say, you are Canada's foremost medical journalist in this country. You really have made yourself an expert on these topics. And one of the things that you are really focused like a laser beam on is the Vaccine Injury Support Program. For people who don't know, although I think regular viewers of Rebel News would already know, but tell us what this program is designed to do.
Of course. So the Vaccine Injury Support Program, acronymed VIST, was a pandemic-born support initiative geared toward financially compensating people who have been maimed and or killed by the purported to be safe and effective novel COVID-19 injections. The government, federally at least, didn't have any sort of contingency plan in place prior to the rollout of these rushed to market products. And so they instituted this VIST program. To my knowledge, the only other place in Canada where this existed previously was in Quebec. And theirs also covered all of the other kind of traditional vaccines, whereas the VIST program is specific to the COVID-19 injections. And there's very strict and stringent submission guidelines for people to even be able to start a claim process. For instance, I'll just pull it directly from their website right now. What constitutes a serious and permanent injury? Well, of course, it must be serious and permanent. It's defined as a severe, life-threatening or life-altering injury that may require in-person hospitalization or a prolongation of existing hospitalization, and, so there's a catch, and results in persistent or significant disability or incapacity, or where the outcome is a congenital malformation, and get this, or death. So don't forget that we were psyoped, essentially. There was a massive psychological operation that went into play late 2020 and early 2021 that coincided with the rollout of these injections that told everybody they were safe and effective. And the idea behind that at the time was get your shot to protect your community, protect your grandma, be able to gather indoors. There was all of these social stipulations placed on anybody who was deemed a dangerous super spreader, otherwise known as an anti-vaxxer, who said, hold on a minute, I'd like to just wait for maybe the clinical trials to be completed before I decide to go forward with this injection that we really know nothing at that point about. And they were really smeared, slandered, ostracized from society completely. If you remember when the vaccine mandates and the vaccine passports were coming into effect, you couldn't go to the theater with your friends. You couldn't go out for dinner with your spouse, your family. There was even rules and regulations put into place for family gatherings at their homes, Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner during peak hysteria. And so these shots were really pushed down everybody's throats. And meanwhile, as they're talking out of their mouth that they're so safe and effective, the government is also putting a program in place that compensates people who are injured so severely that they're unable to work, they're unable to keep up with their day-to-day, and or they die. So we have really been on top of this since the onset, filing access to information requests. And for anybody at home who doesn't know, we have a special portal there called rebelinvestigates.com, where all of our exclusive reports are housed and contained. And what we discovered through those initial access to information requests is that the government had originally planned, and when I say government, I mean specifically Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada, who's responsible for running this program. They originally accounted for or assumed that there would be approximately 400 claims per year. And we discovered that that amount was capped halfway, so 6 months into the first year of the rollout of this program that came into effect by the summer of 2021. And in those documents, there was a ton of redactions. And something that caught my eye was the difference between where they stated in those response documents that there was ongoing financial support, and so that meant to the victims, versus the cost to administer the program. And there was a massive difference there between what was being allocated to the families versus what was going to the consultancy firm running and administering this program. And so it took almost a year to appeal that and get the redacted documents back uncensored. And what we found was, out of the original $32 million that was allocated, the total funding amount to run this program from 2021 until 2026, there was approximately 12,000 of that allocated to the actual people suffering from vaccine injury. And the rest, 60%, would end up in the hands of the consultancy firm Raymond Grant Shabbat Thornton Consultancy, Inc., to simply administer the program. And so the vast majority of the funds were not actually reaching the pockets of the victims of this safe and effective marketing scheme, is what I refer to it as, but rather back into the hands of these consultants who also had other conflicts of interest, were pivotal really in supporting the government's institution of the vaccine mandate program for federal workers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really twisty, turny program that unfortunately doesn't end up helping the people who are suffering these devastating injuries.
So to just clarify the numbers, we've got $32 million for the program in total, which seems actually low. And then we've got 12 million is all that went to the people who were vaccine injured. And we know it's thousands and thousands. And that means a full 20 million went to line the pockets of this consultancy firm. One of the things we saw during the National Citizens Inquiry, the citizen-led inquiry into the government's overreaction into the COVID pandemic, was just the sheer difficulty for really, truly, genuinely vaccine-injured people to access this VIST program. People who got blood clots. I know one of my dearest, closest friends, she just, for her, it was a matter of mental health. I need to leave my house and do something normal. She took the vaccine, and otherwise healthy young woman, blood clot in her bicep, very close to her heart. Another man that I met at the whistle stop, a young man working in the oil field. The next time I saw him, he is walking with a cane, with paralysis on one side of his body because he had a stroke. And these are the people who don't qualify for VIST, even though we know 100% they were vaccine injured.
If they're even remotely functioning, they seem to be disregarded as not qualifying for this program. And I want to note here, too, that those numbers that I listed, that was the original budget allocation.
Right.
We know that as of last month, so December 2023, that the government has already paid out $11 million worth of compensation to the families that have been affected by this safe and effective narrative. And so that is already only $1 million off of what they budgeted for until 2026. So we're only about halfway, just a little bit over halfway through this program that's supposed to wrap up in 2026. And already they're going to be, at least I would speculate, twice as much over budget as they originally planned for. So there's that. But, you know, even on the Health Canada website, you can see that there has been almost 58,712 total adverse events reported following immunization with this novel injection. Of those, there were 11,702 that were serious. And serious is really an arbitrary definition that also includes death. But regardless, this VIST program has processed and confirmed a very tiny fraction of those. And we know that according to the FDA, only 1% of adverse events ever go to actually being formally documented and reported. So all of this reflects and represents a mere fraction of, and I would even say a fraction of a fraction of those who have actually been affected by this. And we've reported extensively on the vast amount of vaccine reactions. One of the first stories that I reported on actually was in June or July 2021, and following the first injection of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which thereafter came with hefty safety signals due to thrombosis, as you mentioned, Sheila, clotting. And this gentleman, Kevin Street, was experiencing such debilitating, not only physical, but also neurological symptoms that he was actually mentally and psychologically unable to sift through the insane amount of bureaucracy and paperwork needed to even navigate this newly released system. And as you mentioned at the National Citizens Inquiry, one particular woman that I interviewed, Meredith Klitsky, same thing. She was so neurologically hampered by whatever symptoms she was experiencing that she described the stacks of paperwork that she couldn't even get through on a day-to-day basis because her injury was so debilitating, and she had to go through all the rigmarole with a doctor, a specialist, go to all these appointments. And that's if the doctors will even acknowledge and document these adverse events, because they've been so terrified by their regulators to do anything that goes against that safe and effective narrative.